Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our sandals, stepping through time and getting very familiar with the finer points of Roman toilet culture. You're standing in a sun-baked Roman street, the kind where the air smells like bread, sweat, and the faint but persistent echo of Garum Rome's famously fishy condiment. You're guided by the sound of flowing water and distant chatter until you push aside a heavy curtain and walk into one of the ancient world's most misunderstood marvels. The public latrine. There's no door, no privacy. Just a long, cool stone bench with curious holes carved evenly across the top, water gurgling beneath, and the echo of conversations past still clinging to the limestone walls. It smells okay-ish. And here's the kicker. Everyone's looking at you like you've been expected. Because in this city, everyone talks in the toilet. You're about to learn how this stone symphony of sanitation was built from sewer trench to marble finish, and why it became the Roman version of a modern co-working space. You'll sit beside senators and bakers, whisper jokes and prayers, and maybe, just maybe, leave with a bit more respect for the humble toilet. You probably won't survive this shift. You're expected to work barehanded, ignore the rats, and pass the sponge when needed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love knowing how far this sleepy little channel reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your day just outside the Subura district, where the insulae stack like crumbling birthday cakes and laundry flaps in the breeze like tired flags. Your assignment? Assist the architectus latrinarum essentially, a toilet designer with delusions of grandeur. He hands you a set of rudimentary blueprints, which you cannot read, and points to the spot on the ground where your work begins. The location is key. This latrine must serve a nearby market, a bathhouse, and whoever else stumbles in so proximity to an aqueduct and main sewer line is crucial. You mark the spot, then grab a pickaxe. The sun has barely risen, and you're already sweating like a gladiator at tax season. The soil is tougher than it looks, clay mixed with rubble and shards of amphorae. You dig shoulder deep into Roman filth, imagining what poor soul dropped their ring here 200 years ago. The cats are back, watching silently, judging your form. At some point, your neighbor unearths a coin. He keeps it. You get back pain. As the trench deepens, the foreman starts muttering about slope. Roman engineers, famously, calculated the precise gradient to make waste flow naturally toward the Cloaca Maxima Rome's massive central sewer. They didn't have laser levels, just plumb bobs, good instincts, and very little room for error. If the angle's wrong, you get stagnation, the kind that sticks in your nose for weeks. Mainstream historical fact? Romans were obsessive about water flow. Their entire sanitation system relied on gravity and aqueducts delivering fresh water constantly, keeping latrines flushed and cleaner than you'd expect. You pause for a water break and overhear two workers arguing. Should the latrine have a straight or U-shaped bench? Historians still argue whether certain layouts were tied to social hierarchy or just local taste. Your vote doesn't count. You're holding a shovel. By mid-afternoon, you've struck what you think is a buried altar, but turns out to be an old trash pit full of broken tiles and chicken bones. Your foreman nods approvingly and orders a libation offering anyway, just in case. The Romans were very into mixing religion with plumbing. There are household spirits, lares, sewer deities, cloacina, and even stories of ghosts haunting latrines, which, let's be honest, is a power move. Fringe tidbit? Some Romans carried personal charms shaped like tiny phalluses, believed to ward off evil spirits that lurked in dark, moist places, like toilets. You consider crafting one, but realize you're too tired to whittle. By sunset, the trench is ready. Your spine feels like it's been cursed by Jupiter, and your hands are stained with who knows what. Still, there's a strange pride to it. Tomorrow, you'll lay the base stones. Soon, People will sit here and gossip, argue, maybe even fall in love. You've taken the first step toward making a Roman latrine, and it begins not with marble or mosaics, but with dirt, sweat, and a trench that slopes just right. You wake up sore in places you didn't know existed. Your hands, blistered from yesterday's trench digging, now tremble as you wrap a linen cloth around each palm. Welcome back to the site. The sun hasn't even crested the rooftops, and you're already ankle-deep in dust and morning gossip. A woman selling honey cakes passes by and calls you mud boy. It's fine. You're basically a civil engineer now. Today, it's time to build the foundation. This part isn't glamorous. There's no singing, no mosaic tiles, no sweet-smelling incense. Just a lot of back-breaking work involving heavy volcanic stone. You're handed a shovel and a flat wedge of pumice, and before you can even think of skipping breakfast, the overseer yells something about opus caementicium Roman concrete. If you thought the Romans invented roads, surprise. They also invented concrete. And not the cheap stuff either. This blend of lime, volcanic ash, and rock aggregate can survive for millennia. What's holding up the Colosseum? This magic gray goo. You mix the mortar with a wooden paddle in a pit that smells like vinegar and hope. It's heavy, sticky, and warm. A few drops sizzle on your skin. It's fine. You're fine. The guy next to you is muttering a prayer to Cloacina again. Maybe she does unions? Once the concrete is ready, you line the bottom of the trench with rubble. Layer after layer, you add bigger stones, pressing them in while the concrete sets around them. The process is slow and rhythmic scoop. Smear, slap, swear. Every now and then, someone finds a relic in old pipe fragment, a shard of a perfume bottle, or once, a carved bone die. The superstition on site grows faster than the wall. You're told not to whistle or mention death, because the sewers might hear you. Mainstream historical fact? Many Roman public toilets were deliberately placed above major sewer lines to take advantage of existing infrastructure. Efficiency was the Roman way. Why build another pipeline when one's already running beneath the forum? The walls begin to take shape thick, sturdy, and deeply utilitarian. No one's trying to win a design award here, but you can already imagine the echoes that will bounce off these stones. Everything in Rome echoes. Whisper a secret in the Subura, and someone near the Senate will hear about it by dinner. You're helping align the drainage channel when a merchant stops to chat. "So what is this going to be?" he asks. You tell him it's a latrine. He scoffs. "No doors?" You shrug. "No partitions?" You shake your head. "We all just sit next to each other like grapes on a vine?" You nod. He laughs, then spits. "You Romans are strange." You remind him he's Roman. He walks off, grumbling. Now here comes the part you've been dreading. The test flow. The engineers pour buckets of water from a nearby aqueduct spur into the drainage trench to check the slope. The water flows perfectly at first, until it doesn't. A low spot causes backflow. You watch in horror as a slow-moving bubble of brown water snakes backward toward the worksite. The crew panics. Someone grabs a bronze stick. Another starts scooping with a pan. You leap out of the trench just in time. Fringe tidbit? There's an ancient Roman curse tablet dug up near Bath in England where someone asked the gods to smite whoever stole their cloak and defecated in their bathhouse. Toilet-related curses were oddly specific and common. With a few adjustments and a lot of cursing, non-magical, the water flows properly again. Gravity, it turns out, is unforgiving. But once the drainage channel is corrected, a collective sigh rolls through the crew. It's a small miracle. Water flows in, filth flows out, and nobody's sandals got ruined. You pat the warm stone with your hand, feeling oddly proud of what's just a very fancy ditch. Historians still argue whether the earliest latrines were publicly funded or built by wealthy patrons trying to win favor. Either way, you're not getting paid, but the satisfaction of seeing the system work, almost worth the smell. Night falls, and the foundation is set. Tomorrow, you'll start hauling the materials for the floor and seat. You know you're not supposed to sleep on site, but you do anyway, curled in a corner beside a stack of bricks, your cloak over your face to block out the moonlight and the occasional rat. Somewhere nearby, someone is playing a flute. Somewhere else, someone is relieving themselves in a bush because your latrine isn't done yet. But it will be. You've laid the foundation. The rest is just stone, sweat, and a surprising amount of social interaction. And tomorrow, you get to meet the aqueduct. You wake to the sound of clanking metal on stone and the hoarse call of a vendor hawking boiled chickpeas far too early. Your back is stiff. Your mouth tastes like yesterday's dust, and a cat is sitting on your chest, staring into your soul like it knows what you did in that drainage trench. No time to dwell. Today, you meet the miracle that makes Rome's toilets possible. The aqueduct. You shuffle down the Via Tiburtina with the work crew, led by a man who claims to be the Aqua Curatora water manager with a superiority complex and a fancy cloak. He carries a stick for pointing and very little patience for your questions. You pass under one of the massive arches that make up the aqueduct system, a towering marvel of Roman engineering. It hums quietly, like a sleeping beast, whispering the promise of endless flow. Up there, invisible to most, clean water courses through lead or terracotta pipes, pulled not by pumps or sorcery, but gravity alone. The system is so cleverly designed that it can send water dozens of miles across valleys and hills using only subtle slopes. You marvel, then immediately trip over a stone and stub your toe. Mainstream historical fact? The city of Rome was fed by at least 11 major aqueducts during its peak, supplying everything from bathhouses and fountains to private homesand, yes, public toilets. Your job? Help connect your almost finished latrine to the nearest spur of the aqueduct system. That means building a narrow, sloped channel lined with terracotta piping that delivers a continuous stream of fresh water to the latrine's central flow system. This water won't just fill the hand-washing basin. It'll rinse the stone bench gutter and keep the sewage moving beneath the seats. So you begin hauling ceramic pipes, long and fragile like oversized flutes. They're annoyingly delicate, and the guy in charge keeps yelling about joining angles and seal integrity. You nod like you understand, then accidentally chip one on your knee. You try to hide it with mortar. It mostly works. Probably. The air grows thick with the smell of wet clay, and your hands turn pink from mixing lime with ash again. You lay the piping carefully, then seal the joints with a slurry that smells suspiciously like vinegar and goat urine. You don't ask. It's better that way. While smoothing mortar with a flat trowel, a grizzled old worker sidles up to you. He has no teeth and an opinion on everything. "You ever hear about the pipe thief?" he rasps. "Used to crawl inside aqueduct tunnels at night. Steal water, steal water." You blink. "How would you even do that?" He taps his nose and whispers, "Clay siphons. Cut one in, take what you need. The city never knows." Then he shuffles away. You're left with a mental image of someone in a tunic, elbow deep in an aqueduct at midnight. Fringe tidbit: there were actual water theft police in ancient Rome officials who patrolled aqueduct lines to prevent illegal taps and leaks. People really would siphon water like some kind of proto-plumber outlaw. As the last pipe settles into place, you and your team test the flow. A glorious stream of clean water courses through the system. It splashes into the small stone channel inside the latrine foundation, hugging the slope just right. It swirls, rushes, and then disappears into the drainage opening. Everyone cheers. Someone tries to do a victory dance and twists their ankle. Historians still argue whether these small aqueduct branches were always authorized. Your overseer mutters later, watching the water flow. Or if crews just tapped in and hoped the city didn't notice. You find this deeply comforting. Apparently, sketchy plumbing is timeless. With water now flowing into your future toilet, you get a new task: installing the splash channel. This is the narrow stream that'll run just in front of the toilet bench, constantly rinsing away what everyone's rear ends leave behind. The Romans weren't obsessed with privacy, but they were big fans of running water. You chisel a shallow groove into the foundation stone, then smooth it by hand. It's hypnotic work. One stroke after another. Water will run here. Feet will dangle above it. Sponges on Stixtersoriums. The horror of every new apprentice will be rinsed here. You try not to imagine using one. You fail. Someone nearby cracks a joke about dropping their toga in the splash gutter. It's not that funny, but everyone laughs. You're starting to get it. The toilet isn't just a necessity, it's a place. A gathering spot. An accidental amphitheater. A daily checkpoint. And it all starts with water. The sun lowers. Shadows stretch long across the job site. The aqueduct spur gleams in the fading light. Water still whispering through the clay pipes. Your hands are raw, your knees ache, but something clicks into place. You're building not just infrastructure, but community. A room where senators and slaves might sit elbow to elbow, argue about fish sauce, and debate gladiator stats while nature takes its course. You pack up your tools. A pigeon poops exactly where your head was 5 seconds ago. You take this as a sign. Time to sleep. Tomorrow, the bench arrives. The bench arrives at dawn, carried on the backs of 2 oxen and 3 very annoyed men. It's massive, longer than a fishing boat, carved from a single slab of travertine, and perforated with perfect, evenly spaced oval openings. You eye it like a nervous apprentice eyeing a very judgmental professor. This, after all, is where everything happens. The Cetolith stone toilet benches what transforms your underground trench and flowing water into an actual latrine. Without it, you've just got a fancy, moist hole in the ground. The team grunts as they lower it into place, with a system of pulleys, wedges, and whispered prayers. One false move and the whole thing could crack in half. But today, fortune smiles on you. The slab lands with a solid, satisfying thunk, lining up perfectly with the splash gutter and the hidden waste channel beneath. The bench has 12 holosics per side, evenly spaced. No dividers, no privacy. You test one, nervously perching your backside above the stone. It's cold. Of course it is. The chill travels straight through the fabric of your tunic and into your soul. Mainstream historical fact: most Roman public toilets had no stalls or partitions. You sat side by side, quite literally cheek to cheek, engaging in conversation while taking care of business. It wasn't considered in dissent, it was communal. And oh, the stories these benches could tell. The worker next to you, the same one who claims to have wrestled a sewer eel with his bare hands, tells you about a senator who drafted entire speeches while seated. Couldn't think unless he was sitting over a hole, he says. You nod solemnly. Creative processes are strange things. You begin work anchoring the bench, chiseling and fitting support stones beneath it, sealing cracks, and making sure the alignment is tight. The bench has 2 sets of holes, the larger ones for, and smaller circular ones in front for sponge sticks. That's right, Romans didn't use paper. They used shared sponges, rinsed in the running water gutter, and reused by the next visitor. Shutters. Fringe tidbit? Archaeologists have found remnants of sponge sticks and suspect that some bathhouses had communal baskets for them. Imagine reaching into a mystery bucket after a long day. Try not to scream. As you scrape mortar into place, someone raises the age-old question: which hole was the best one? The crew breaks into debate. The ones near the entrance are more popular but noisier. The back holes offer peace but smellier surroundings. Middle right, one guy insists. It's got the best breeze. Historians still argue whether users had informal seating hierarchy, certain spots reserved for regulars, elders, or local gossip kings. You carve a small notch near your favorite hole. Not because it's special, but because you know someone's going to ask, which one did you build? You want to be able to point and say, that one. The one with the perfect slope. You help test the final setup with a generous splash of water. It flows smoothly under the bench and through the trench system. exiting into the broader sewer below. It's oddly soothing to watch a tiny artificial river dedicated to humanity's most primal release. It bubbles, gurgles, then disappears into darkness. You imagine how many lives this setup will serve, how many conversations it will host, how many secrets will be whispered while the latrine echoes with the sound of communal relief. A poet once said, "All roads lead to Rome." But you're starting to believe that, eventually, all Romans led themselves right here, side by side, knees almost touching, arguing about chariot racing and grain prices while sitting on polished stone. And then there's the matter of the wind holes. You hadn't noticed them before small slits cut just above the larger holes. Ventilation, maybe? Or some kind of early odor control? A few scholars think they were to release methane buildup from the sewer. Others argue they were just for airflow. Historians still debate their true purpose, but you like the idea that the Romans planned even for the breeze. The last task of the day is etching the drainage route into a diagram for the city records. It's mostly symbolic. Nobody really reads these unless something explodes. But you scratch the outline into a clay tablet with pride, marking the flow points, bench length, and connection to the aqueduct. In a way, you've just signed your name into history with water and waste. As the sun dips behind the rooftops, the bench gleams in the golden light. It's beautiful, in a weirdly sacred way. You built this, from dirt trench to polished stone. You imagine the first person who'll sit here, maybe tomorrow, letting out a long sigh while chatting with a neighbor. They'll never know your name, but they'll feel the smooth stone, hear the flowing water, and take part in one of Rome's most democratic experiences. You smile, then promptly stub your toe on a bucket. Again. So here you are, the holes in the bench, the water's flowing, the trench is sealed, and the gods of sanitation seem moderately pleased with you. You should be done. You want to be done. But no, there's still the matter of decorating the latrine. Yes, decorating. Because nothing says civic pride like carving dolphins above a toilet. Your crew has been assigned one of the busier neighborhoods near the market square, where even the walls tell stories. So of course the latrine can't just be stone and stink, it needs a touch of culture. The overseer announces that today's tasks include wall murals, mosaic flooring, and maybe even a statue or two if the budget hasn't mysteriously disappeared into someone's wine cellar. You start by helping mix the mortar for the mosaic floor. The tiles arrive in bucket-steiny squares of marble, terracotta, and black basalt that clink like coins. There's a basic pattern planned, waves along the border, and a central panel with a fish, a trident, and, oddly enough, a cheerful squid. You're told it's symbolic. Of what? Don't ask questions, just make the squid smile. Mainstream historical fact: Roman public toilets often had decorative elements, mosaics, painted walls, frescoes, and even inscriptions reminding people to keep clean or not loiter. Some were humorous, others philosophical. Toilets weren't just practical, they were statements. As you set the tiles in place, the smell of lime paste fills the air, sharp and earthy. Your fingers sting a little, and the repetitive work lulls you into a rhythm. Dip, press, adjust, curse. Occasionally, someone steps on the half-done section and gets chased off with a broom. Meanwhile, a group of painters is busy whitewashing the interior walls. You overhear the lead artist arguing with a young assistant about whether Cupid on a dolphin is appropriate toilet imagery. "He's a symbol of joy," the master insists. "He's literally riding a fish into the sewer," the apprentice fires back. They compromise on a sea nymph with suspiciously muscular calves. Fringe tidbit: one toilet in Ostia featured a mural of Fortuna, the goddess of luck, hovering above the seats. It's still unclear whether this was meant to bring blessings or just irony. Then come the inscriptions. A scribe in ink-stained robes shows up with a bag of charcoal and a chisel. He starts scratching short verses and moral reminders into the plastered walls. One says, "He who sits must not linger." Others wait with full bellies and anger. Another one reads, "Use the sponge, not your toga. The Empire thanks you." You ask if you can carve something, and after some grumbling, you're handed a dull chisel. Carefully, you etch a little line into the border of the mosaic. Hoc opus meum est. This is my work. It's a small rebellion, a whisper into history. The bench area gets polished again, and decorative bronze fittings are added near the water basin. They're shaped like lion heads. You ask why. "Because eagles were too expensive," someone mutters. By midday, the latrine is no longer just a place to relieve yourself. It's a room. Cool stone underfoot, colorful walls, gentle echo. You imagine it full of people. Toga hems brushing the floor, conversations drifting between holes, the occasional toddler escaping under the benches. Rome in miniature. A passing matron peers in. "Nice squid," she says. "You beam." Historians still argue whether these decorations were meant to elevate the dignity of public defecation or distract from the smell. Probably both. Romans had a flair for turning the unpleasant into the impressive. That afternoon, the statue arrives. It's not big just, a bust of Venus, chipped nose and all. You're told she'll sit on a small plinth by the entrance, facing inward. "The goddess of beauty," your overseer says with a smirk, "watching over our most vulnerable moments." You set her carefully in place. It's an odd feeling, locking eyes with a stone goddess before heading to the bench. But something about it feels Roman. Life, after all, happens in public here. Baths, meals, debates, bowel movements, they're all communal, all theatrical. As the day winds down, your team admires the work. The floor glows in the afternoon light. The squid, against all odds, looks majestic. And for a moment, the place doesn't smell like ammonia and despair. It smells like fresh plaster, crushed stone, and faint dignity. You take one last look before covering the entrance with a curtain. Tomorrow, the latrine will open to the public. Tomorrow, people will start filling these benches, splashing the water, swapping gossip, and probably critiquing the squid. You hope they notice the care. You also hope no one chips your mosaic. Morning arrives with a trumpet blast, and the unmistakable aroma of fried fish drifting in from the market. You yawn, stretch, and shuffle toward your newly completed masterpiece. Today's the day the public finally arrives, and you're about to witness what happens when hundreds of Romans descend on your toilet like it's the hottest tavern in town. You're barely finished tying your sandals when you hear the first enthusiastic sound effects echoing from the latrine chamber. Someone's already in there, bless them, putting your sponge channel to the test. You wince. "Strong opening," someone mutters behind you. But what surprises you most is the atmosphere. By mid-morning, the latrine isn't just occupied, it's buzzing. Not with flies, though those are definitely present, but with conversation. Laughter, arguments, and deeply unfiltered opinions about last night's theater performance all reverberate off the mosaic walls. It's like a chat room minus the privacy, plus the smell. You hover near the entrance, pretending to adjust the curtain while eavesdropping on the inaugural dialogues of Rome's new talking throne. "I told Marcus he couldn't keep a chicken in the Insula courtyard," a woman proclaims between plops. "It's illegal." "No, it's not," says her neighbor, shifting on the stone. "As long as it's not crowing before sunrise. That's the rule." Mainstream historical fact? Roman public toilets weren't quiet places. They were designed for communal use, and talking was not only common, it was expected. Think of it as your local cafe, if the coffee was replaced by. You get the idea. Your bench design proves popular. Everyone has an opinion about which hole has the best breeze, or whether Venus is judging their technique. One merchant even starts assigning his spot, with a folded cloth-like reserving a beach chair. You let it slide. He brings dates. Then come the gossips. 3 elderly women settle onto the back row like queens entering court. They brought fruit, a bag of hazelnuts, and more scandal than the Senate can handle. You learn about 2 divorces, 1 suspected arson, and the scandalous fact that a local baker has started shaving his arms. Fringe tidbit? Roman elites considered body hair management an indicator of civility. Some even visited special barbers for full-body plucking sessions. Yes, plucking. Top to toe. Someone belches. Someone else swears the sponge basin water is too warm. You see a man enter, drop his toga, and then pull out a scroll to read while squatting. He's in for the long haul. You join a group huddled near the entrance. One guy's explaining how the splash gutter works, gesturing like a magician, revealing a trick. You rinse here, he says, demonstrating with an imaginary stick. Then rotate clockwise. Never counter. You'll splash yourself. Everyone nods solemnly. An elderly ex-legionnaire offers a tip. Warm the sponge under your armpit first. There's a beat of silence. Then someone says, "You're a monster." Historians still argue whether Romans kept personal sponge sticks or shared them communally. It likely varied by region and class. Either way, the idea sparks strong reactions then and now. Around midday, a boy runs in and announces that a local performer is coming to test the acoustics. Yes, test the acoustics. Turns out, your latrine's gentle echo makes it perfect for amateur poets. A skinny man with a loose belt recites a tragic poem about unrequited love and flatulence. The applause is surprisingly genuine. Then the debates begin. One man proposes a radical idea. What if every toilet in Rome had seats with armrests? He is immediately shouted down. "This is a place for business, not lounging," someone yells. "What next, snacks?" someone else adds. You back away, amused. You didn't expect your toilet to become a forum, but here we are. Someone sneaks in a small clay flask of perfume and dabs it under their nose. Civic defense, they say, eyes watering. You make a mental note to start a side hustle selling scented wax sticks. You could call them Let Roma. Late in the day, a toddler waddles in and tries to stick their hand in the water channel. A woman swoops in, grabs them, and scolds, "Do not bathe in the sponge water." Again, this implies it has happened before. By sundown, your toilet has heard more stories than the city archives. It's not just a place to relieve yourself, it's where friendships are formed, insults are traded, and debates about gladiator stats grow alarmingly heated. And you realize, this room, with its echo and stink and awkward eye contact, is one of Rome's great levelers. Rich, poor, freedman, foreigner everyone poops. And in this room, they do it together. You step inside, claiming a brief seat of your own. The stone is cold. Again. But the chatter continues around you, and for a few minutes, you're part of it. A woman to your left complains about olive prices. A man to your right asks if anyone knows a good midwife. Across from you, a teen quietly hums a song while tracing patterns in the tile with his sandal. You built this, not just a latrine, but a place, a rhythm, a flow. You'd think that by now, after the carving, the sponging, the mosaics, and the lively communal performances, you've experienced the full glory of Roman public toilets. But there's one thing the brochures don't mention. Something lurking under your nose, and sometimes on it. Maintenance. Yes, today you're getting up close and personal with the glamorous world of ancient Roman janitorial work. The latrine might look polished when the doors open at dawn, but give it 3 hours of heavy foot traffic, spitting, splashing, and general gastrointestinal adventure, and suddenly, your civic masterpiece turns into a war zone of smells, stains, and soggy sponges. You arrive before sunrise to find a waiting line of grumpy citizens clutching their tunics like hostages. Someone knocks on the wooden post impatiently. "What's the holdup?" "The forum's already full." You sigh. Time to scrub. Mainstream historical fact. Roman latrines were cleaned daily, sometimes more, by paid laborers or enslaved workers known as foricariae. They cleared waste channels, refreshed sponge basins, and kept water flowing often with limited tools and zero thanks. Your job today is to clear the main runoff trench beneath the seating bench. It's a mix of fresh water, yesterday's regrets, and a suspiciously bubbly patch someone claims is leftover soup. You reach in with a long-handled rake and start scraping. Behind you, another worker refills the sponge basin with clean water fetched from a nearby cistern. You watch him stir in a little vinegar and antiseptic touch. You ask if it helps the smell. Not the smell, he grins. The bugs. Comforting. You both jump as something large and wet splashes up from the trench. Probably just a frog. Hopefully a frog. Fringe tidbit? Some Roman toilets reportedly use live frogs or eels in sponge basins to keep the water cleaner. Think of them as the empire's earliest sanitation assistants with teeth. You move next to the wall, where yesterday's fruit-eating trio has left behind a sticky citrus explosion. You scrape orange peels and walnut shells off the mosaic. At least the squid seems amused. Mid-morning, you're called over to investigate a weird burbling in the water channel. Turns out, a chunk of bread crust has clogged the flow. Bread. Why? You fish it out and offer a quick PSA to the row of users currently seated. Bread is not a sponge. Repeat, bread is not a sponge. A few nod solemnly. One guy shrugs like he's heard worse. Outside, the chamber pot cart arrives a low wooden trolley, filled with sloshing amphorae, and one deeply overworked donkey. These pots are placed in alleyways and smaller homes without running water. But today, someone's mistaken your latrine's outer hallway as an approved drop-off point. You help the donkey handler roll the cart back to its correct route while holding your breath. You return to find a new problem. Someone's written poetry directly onto the wall with soot. At first, it seems charming. Roses are red. Latrines are shared. If you must grunt, at least be spared. But halfway through the verse, it devolves into an aggressive political rant about wheat prices and someone named Lucius. You sigh and scrub the wall with vinegar and chalk dust. Why chalk? A curious bystander asks. To absorb the shame, you mutter. Historians still argue whether Romans regulated toilet behavior strictly or let it evolve naturally. There's evidence for both. Some cities posted rules outside. Others seemed to embrace total anarchy. The truth probably varied by region, class, and the patience of the cleaning crew. Later, you check the drainage pipes feeding out toward the street's main sewer room's famous Cloaca Maxima. One of them seems slower than usual. You wedge your stick inside and dislodge a soggy clog made entirely of olive pits, small bones, and one half-chewed fig. You make a mental note. Add a sign. Do not eat in here. Seriously. As you rinse off your arms at the secondary basin, the cleaner one, an old man waves you over. Is this yours? He asks, holding up a tiny carved figurine. It's a dolphin, probably part of the entrance frame decoration that someone pried loose. You nod. He hands it over with a knowing look. Nice squid, he adds. Afternoon light filters in. The murals seem brighter now, touched by that golden haze Rome does so well. Despite the mess, despite the effort, you feel something close to pride. This isn't just janitorial work, it's preservation. You're holding back entropy with vinegar and a stick. You watch as a group of children chase each other between the columns near the entrance. One boy pauses, peers in, and asks, "Is this where you talk and poop?" You nod. Mostly in that order. He gives you a thumbs up and runs off. Before sunset, you set a sponge stick carefully back into its basin, double-check the water flow, and give the walls a final wipe down. You light a small oil lamp in the corner, just enough to guide late-night visitors without illuminating too much detail. The curtain flutters closed. A soft breeze carries the lingering scent of vinegar, lamp oil, and just a whisper of human chaos. Tomorrow, the cycle will repeat. The lines, the gossip, the debates, the clogs. But for now, you've earned your rest. And maybe just maybe a tiny piece of Roman civilization runs just a little smoother because of you. You wake the next day to an oddly peaceful moment. No shouts, no sloshing, no accusatory. Who tracked in fig mash? Just bird song. But it doesn't last. You hear the unmistakable clatter of sandal surgeon's sandals. A boy skids to a stop in front of your home, panting. "Sir, there's a problem with the toilet." You knew this day would come. You throw on your toga like a soldier donning armor. Today, the latrine meets its first crisis. When you arrive, the scene is already chaotic. The sponge basin has overflowed. A trickle of water snakes across the floor like it's fleeing the situation. Someone's trying to mop with a curtain. Another woman is yelling about bad omens and wiping her feet on a senator's discarded scroll. You grab the rake. Time for triage. Mainstream historical fact? Roman toilets were connected to complex underground sewage systems, at least in cities like Rome or Ostia. But when those systems backed up, they could cause floods, foul smells, and even small explosions of methane. Yes, explosions. You suddenly feel very flammable. You follow the overflow upstream and find the problem. A clogged outlet pipe. Judging by the half-dissolved cabbage chunk in the flow, this is not your average blockage. You jab, wiggle, and finally unjam the mess with a satisfying glorple. Cheers erupt behind you like you've just saved a drowning child. Which, in a way, you have, except it was a sponge. But the relief is short-lived. An elderly merchant storms in, face red. "Who designed this sponge gutter?" "I demand to know." "I slipped, twisted my ankle, and insulted 3 senators trying to stand back up." You step forward, hands up. "Let's all just take a breath. In fact, maybe not a deep one." He points dramatically. "It needs rails, and signs, and possibly guards." A debate breaks out among the crowd. Some support the idea of safety rails. Others argue for slippery floor contests. One man proposes sponge rental tokens. You pay a denarius, you get the clean sponge. Fringe tidbit? In some Roman bathhouses and latrines, users did bring their own tools brushes, cloths, or perfumed wipes. There was even a market for engraved personal cleaning sticks, like customized toothbrushes for your other end. While the conversation rages, you notice a figure lurking at the edge of the crowd. A tall woman in crisp linen, arms crossed, observing everything. A government inspector. Of course. She introduces herself as Julia from the Curatores Regionumdi, regional supervisors responsible for public infrastructure. "Nice paintwork," she says, glancing at your mosaic squid. "But I'm here about the complaints." You nod, internally sweating. She walks the latrine perimeter with the air of someone mentally cataloging fines. She asks about water flow rates. You bluff a little. Cleanliness schedules. You lie a little. Vermin control. You change the subject. She crouches near the sponge basin, dips a finger in, sniffs it, and raises one eyebrow. Vinegar levels are low. You nearly faint. Historians still argue whether Roman sanitation was managed centrally or left to local initiative. There's evidence of both. Large-scale projects like aqueducts were state-funded, but smaller facilities like latrines were often privately maintained under loose supervision, which means Julia can technically shut you down. You stammer something about implementing a daily vinegar rotation protocol, which sounds fake but official. She nods. Before leaving, she offers one cryptic comment. "You're lucky you're not near the Colosseum. You wouldn't believe what they flush." You survive inspection, but only just. Now it's time for repairs. You close the latrine for an hour, hang a rope across the door, and grab your patch kit. Clay, resin, plaster, and one deeply skeptical goatskin apron. The walls get repainted, the bench edges are smoothed, and you carve a new sign. Please do not stuff vegetables down the drain. No, not even if they're overcooked. You add sponge hooks along the back wall, giving regulars a place to hang their lucky stick. One visitor claps. Finally, no more sponge on sponge crimes. By afternoon, the chamber is fresh, orderly, and you dare say elegant. You light a cone of incense in the corner. Frankincense, with just a hint of citrus. It lasts 10 minutes, but it's glorious while it burns. That night, a young woman arrives with a cart full of olive oil amphorae. She pauses at the entrance, sniffs the air, and smiles. Smells less like despair in here. Nice. You nod, wiping grout from your arm. We've had upgrades. She grins. Still can't beat the gossip. Inside, the usual buzz returns. Someone's singing. Someone else is debating whether Jupiter's moods affect digestion. The sponge water is flowing. The floor is dry. The squid mural now has a crown. And you sit on your favorite bench, elbow resting on the warm stone, the room pulsing softly with voices. Your latrine lived through its first disaster and came out cleaner, stronger, and maybe even more appreciated. You lean back and whisper to the squid, "We're in the big leagues now." It doesn't answer, but you're pretty sure it gets it. By now, you've cleaned clogs, bribed inspectors with charm and vinegar, and moderated at least 4 arguments over sponge technique. So it's only natural that the next phase of your Roman toilet adventure is politics. Yes, buckle up your sandals, because today the latrine becomes a forum knot, the marble columned kind where senators bicker in togas, but the tiled, damp kind, where everyone's toga is slightly damp and nobody pretends to be polite. It starts with a few regulars. There's Gaius, the retired soldier with an entire personal conspiracy theory about the aqueducts. They're controlling the water to dull our senses. And Flavia, the fishmonger's wife who's essentially running an unlicensed betting ring from seat 3. They've been talking in the latrine for weeks. Harmless stuff at first. Grain prices, bad theater, local crushes. But recently, it's gotten louder. Today, you step in to find 20 people crammed inside, shouting over one another. Someone's even brought a scroll stand. "Order!" cries Flavia, slapping a wet sponge stick like a gavel. "We'll begin with neighborhood complaints. Gaius, you're up." "I demand an investigation into the bread guild. This week's loaves are smaller, I've measured." A chorus of groans. Someone throws a date pit. Mainstream historical fact? Romans often conducted casual business and discussion in communal places, public baths, market stalls, and yes, even latrines. Political gossip, legal disputes, and local issues were fair game. The walls may have echoed, but no one cared. You squeeze between spectators and whisper, "Hey guys, this is still technically a toilet." "You're welcome to leave," says Flavia sweetly, "but the vote's about to start." The vote? Oh yes. She's printed tokens. Everyone's supposed to cast one into an amphora to decide whether to petition for an extra public lantern by the latrine entrance. You sigh, grab a token, and toss it in. Fringe tidbit? Archaeologists have found clay token stesserai in ancient Roman drains. Though mostly used for games or theater entry, it's not far-fetched that repurposed tokens made their way into everyday, unofficial voting, especially in tight-knit neighborhoods. Then comes the big topic, new taxes. Someone's cousin in the Senate says there's a bill to tax urine collection. The room erupts. A quick sidebar. Yes, Romans taxed urine. The vectigal urinae, introduced under Emperor Vespasian, was a real, functioning tax on public urinals. You see, collected urine wasn't just waste, it was a cleaning agent. Fullers, cloth cleaners, bought it to bleach garments. So naturally, the state figured, that smells like profit. You now watch as 2 men debate whether it's legal to pee privately to avoid taxation. One woman asks if she can declare her goat's waste under her family quota. Someone else yells, "What if I export my urine?" Do I still pay? Historians still argue whether the urine tax extended to latrine users directly, or only to the trades that collected and resold the waste. The mechanics are murky, but the outrage? Universal. Gaius slams his sponge stick again. Urine is sacred. It belongs to the people, like salt or fish sauce. This earns applause. Even you clap. The passion is weirdly inspiring. After the urine debate, things cool down. Someone brings dates and figs. A few stay to draft a petition on wax tablets, which you suspect no one will read. A boy sketches a tiny cartoon of Emperor Vespasian on the wall, adding, "Smell that money, boss. The resemblance is uncanny." You notice that everyone talks differently in the latrine. There's a kind of honesty here between the marble seats and the soft splash of water. Pretension melts. People admit secrets, worries, even hope. A young baker confides in you. She's saving to buy a second oven, and she's terrified. She's drawn the oven on her palm in charcoal, like a tiny tattoo. "I can't tell my husband," she says. "He'll say it's too risky." You nod. Start small. You'll know when to feed the flame. She smiles. That moment stays with you. Toward evening, an older man sets up a stool just outside and reads poetry aloud. Not graffiterial verses, the kind that curl in your ears and stay. People clap politely. One guy sobs. It's possible he just sat on something sharp, but it feels poetic. And the best part? All of this happened in a toilet. You realize that while Rome has forums for emperors and senators, here in the latrine, regular people carve their voices into the world. It might be over taxes or sponge, etiquette or love or fear, but it's real. You don't just clean this place. You keep it alive. As the crowd thins, you mop up some fallen olive pits and smile. Someone's drawn a doodle of a sponge with a laurel crown labeled Senator Socius. You consider adding a sash. A young man waves goodbye as he leaves. See you at tomorrow's debate. You nod. Only if they serve figs. The squid mural watches it all with a serene, wide-eyed expression. Maybe even approval? You lean against the cool stone, listen to the soft drip of water, and let the sounds of Rome fade into the night. Tomorrow, there will be new discussions, new gossip, maybe even a tiny revolution. And all of it will happen right here, between the marble, the mosaics, and the ever-watchful eyes of Senator Socius. It's dawn again, and this time you arrive early, not because something broke or overflowed, but because you want to listen. You settle onto your usual bench, sponge neatly stowed in its vinegar basin, hands clasped behind your head. The chamber is still quiet, except for the trickle of water, the slight creak of drying clay, and the rustle of the city waking up beyond the walls. And then, footsteps. In comes Marcus, the fruit vendor who always insists figs make people more expressive. Behind him, Junia, who sings arias mid-visit like the acoustics in here are somehow divine. A few others trickle in. Some nod at you, some grunt. One brings you a honey cake. You consider declaring it a national holiday. You're watching something peculiar now. Without any instruction, the regulars begin to settle into their spots. Marcus to the left, near the fresco of Neptune. Junia across from him, near the torch bracket that looks like a melted duck. It's unspoken, but everyone knows their place. Like clockwork, the talking begins. Today's topics: the fish shortage in the Tiber, a questionable statue in the new Forum Plaza, and whether or not honey counts as a divine preservative or just glorified bee vomit. Mainstream historical fact: Roman latrines were not just about bodily functions. In cities like Ostia and Rome, they were often richly decorated and designed as true social spaces. The assumption that all Roman sanitation was crude misses how much intentionality went into creating public harmony even in the bathroom. You look around, There's light coming in from the high window grate, casting mosaic reflections on the floor. One lands right on the squid mural, making it shimmer. Someone's added tiny sandals beneath its tentacles. It now looks like it's about to deliver a very serious lecture. That shimmering, though, that's the kind of thing you'd miss if you just used the toilet and left. But you stay, you linger, you observe. Today, a new woman arrives early 20s, nervous. She peers inside, shifts her weight, considers leaving. You wave her in with a smile. She sits. And then, something incredible happens. As if sensing her discomfort, Marcus softens his voice. Junius sings a quieter tune. One of the older ladies offers the new girl a sponge that smells faintly of rosewater. In minutes, she's laughing. You don't know what's said, but you know she's been welcomed. Fringe tidbit? There's graffiti in Pompeii and Herculaneum latrines that hints at advice, columns, jokes, even romantic confessions. It's not unreasonable to imagine these places as early versions of community notice board sand emotional support circles. You start to notice something deeper. The people who visit the latrine every day aren't just here because nature calls. They come because it's safe. Not in the fortress sense, though. Yes, there's fewer pickpockets when your pants are halfway down, but emotionally safe. There's no hierarchy here. No rich seating area. No elite sponge. Everyone sits on the same stone bench, drops the same fig-laden load, and listens to the same trickling stream. In that equality, something rare happens. Vulnerability. One man speaks of his fear that his pottery stall won't survive the season. A widow wonders aloud if she still counts as a citizen now that no one asks for her bread recipe. A teenage boy finally says, in a barely there voice, that he likes another boy, and he says it while staring at the squid. And no one flinches. No one mocks. Someone, without a word, just passes him a warm towel. You blink a few times. Maybe it's the vinegar in the air. Maybe it's something else. You realize that this latrine isn't just about talking. It's about being heard. Even you, the keeper, the builder, the one who once swore you'd never touch sponge water without gloves again, you find yourself relaxing into the rhythm. The conversations are calming now. Meditative even. Someone tells a joke about Saturn's rings being stolen by a jealous Venus. Laughter echoes off the stone. It sounds like bells underwater. Historians still argue whether Roman society offered consistent communal care spaces or whether these moments of emotional connection were rare and informal. But standing here, surrounded by laughter and soft words and rose-scented vinegar, you think, maybe both are true. Maybe the beauty is in the surprise of it. And then, for the first time, you realize what you've created. This isn't just infrastructure. It's intimacy. You've built a space where masks fall off, where the mess of living becomes strangely poetic, where someone can walk in with their heart all scrambled and leave a little less tangled. You lean against the wall, close your eyes for a moment, and just breathe in the scent of wet stone and old jokes. You remember when you first started, the chaos, the skepticism, the toe stubbing. And now, the latrine is a sanctuary. And maybe, just maybe, the squid mural really is a kind of god. As the day ends and the soft lamplights flicker, you hear someone say it aloud, "This place feels like home." You smile, hands in your lap, and think, yeah, even with the sponge water. So now you're the high priest of poop, the grand custodian of conversation, the unspoken but widely agreed upon mayor of Marble Latrine 14B. It's weird, yes, but also kind of magical. Which is why today hits you like a runaway ox cart. You arrive early again, humming some ridiculous ballad about figs, and you immediately spot it. A scroll pinned to the door with red wax. Official notice from the Adel's office. Closure scheduled for repairs and sanitation enforcement. Effective immediately. Indefinite duration. Do not enter. Your stomach drops. You stare at the scroll like it just insulted your sponge technique, which, honestly, it kind of has. You try the door anyway locked. Someone behind you gasps. Then, another groans. Soon, your regulars begin to arrive in little clusters, drawn by habit and mystery. You read the scroll aloud. A chorus of disbelief follows. What repairs? We just repaired the drainage. It smells better in there than at my cousin's bakery. This is political. I knew it was about the taxes. You sigh. This is more than just an inconvenience. This is a disruption of the city's best-kept social engine. Mainstream historical fact? Public spaces in Rome, including latrines, were under the jurisdiction of elected officials called aediles. They handled everything from street cleaning to building maintenance. They could shut down a structure for repairs or cleanliness, or sometimes simply for political grandstanding. You gather your closest co-conspirators, Junia, Gaius, Flavia, the unofficial fig bookie, and form an emergency council just outside the latrine, under a fig tree that looks like it's also in mourning. Junia, who has clearly missed singing in echo chambers, breaks the silence. Well, we're not just going to stop talking, are we? No, you say. We relocate. Where? Gaius demands. The forum smells like boiled goat. The baths echo too much, and the bakery yells at us for blocking customers. You pace, thinking. Then Flavia snaps her fingers. What about the old grain storehouse? It's empty, mostly dry, no guards. Within the hour, you've repurposed an abandoned corner of Rome into an impromptu off-brand latrine lounge. No actual toilets. Obviously, people are still taking care of business elsewhere, but the community part? That's here, in full force. You set up a bucket of vinegar for nostalgic purposes. Someone brings cushions, and Junia immediately tests the acoustics with a verse of something operatic and deeply inappropriate. It's perfect. Fringe tidbit? While there's little evidence for latrine-specific protest culture, Romans did conduct public demonstrations for issues ranging from water shortages to bread distribution and, yes, even sanitation. There are documented riots over blocked aqueducts and defunct bathhouses. Passion about public infrastructure? Extremely Roman. Someone makes a new squid mural on a cracked wall. It's lopsided and someone's written "still watching" beneath it. Feels right. By midday, the group is buzzing again, this time with indignation, and you're right there with them. It's not about losing a toilet. It's about losing a ritual, a refuge, a rhythm of voices and vinegar and vulnerability. And just like that, a plan starts to form. Flavia begins drafting a petition. Junia writes a song, of course. Gaius prepares a speech that might accidentally start a small revolution. You bake honey cakes shaped like sponge sticks. You figure someone has to keep morale high. Historians still argue whether latrines played a formalized role in urban political expression, or if they were simply convenient spaces for overheard commentary. But here and now, your sponge-scented resistance proves one thing. When people connect deeply in a place, even the removal of that place can't silence them. Night falls, and the fig tree casts long shadows over your makeshift protest zone. Someone lights a small oil lamp. You share warm dates and soft wine and stories that meander like the Tiber. And then, the unthinkable. Aedial Tiberius Flaccus arrives, in person. He's shorter than expected. Fancy sandals, wrinkled nose, like he stepped in something metaphorical. He eyes your group cushions, cakes, makeshift mural sand, says, "What is this?" You open your mouth. Pause. Then say, "It's what happens when you close a space people need." He raises an eyebrow. "It's a toilet." "No," you say softly. "It was a toilet. Now it's a community. You just didn't notice until it disappeared." Flaccus mutters something about unauthorized gatherings and hygiene codes. Then he turns to leave, but not before Gaius plants a honey cake in his hand and says, "From all of us." The Aedial doesn't smile, but he doesn't throw it away either. That night, you sleep lightly. head propped against a sack of flour, surrounded by the quiet breathing of your fellow rebels. There's laughter in the dark, muffled and soft, like someone remembering a joke from earlier. The latrine may be locked, but the spirit of it? Still very much alive. You wake with a flour sack imprint on your cheek and a crick in your neck that screams for a proper marble bench. Morning sun slices through a crack in the grain store wall, catching dust like it's spotlighting the chaos you've made. The aedile's notice might have closed the latrine, but it's done the opposite of silencing you. Outside, the protest gathering is already twice the size. Word spread overnight. Apparently, Junia's ballad about the sponge they took from us made it into a few taverns, and suddenly, your public toilet is a cause célèbre. Vendors set up stalls. Someone's roasting chestnuts. A young man in a tunic that says, "Let my latrine go," offers you a hand-drawn petition with almost 200 names. Flavia's already gathering people in a circle to rehearse chants. It's theatrical, over the top, and absolutely glorious. You look around and think, you didn't build just a toilet. You built a city inside a city. Mainstream historical fact: Roman public life thrived on networks of informal interaction in the markets, the forums, the baths, and yes, even the toilets. These were the crucibles of gossip, business, and the kind of whisper-to-roar public opinion that sometimes changed policy. Still, the actual toilet's gone. Locked, cold, empty. You walk past it, trailing fingers along the worn stone. It's like touching a body without a soul. A few weeds have crept into the cracks already. You kneel down and whisper, "We're not done, old friend." And then you get your second big idea. You don't just need to protest. You need to demonstrate. Recreate what was lost, right there in front of everyone. So you start building. Nothing fancy, some benches, a wooden channel for water. Thanks to a bribe of grapes and mild flattery, the baker lends you her rain barrel. A borrowed cart becomes a vinegar basin. Someone even brings in a real marble slab from a collapsed fountain. Within hours, your pop-up latrine is fully operational. Symbolic only of Corsino One's doing their actual business here, although one kid tries and gets loudly redirected. But the point lands. Passers-by stop, listen, laugh. Some sit, some talk, some look awkward and leave, but most stay. Fringe tidbit. Some Roman festivals involved temporary setups that mimicked everyday architecture fake forums, stages styled like bathhouses. It wasn't unheard of to replicate infrastructure as a form of satire or celebration. You install a fresh mural, the squid, now donning a tiny laurel wreath and holding a scroll that says Vox Latrinae Popula Voice of the toilet people. It becomes a symbol. You paint it on armbands, on tunics. Someone carves it into bread. By dusk, even city officials are coming to observe. One tries to ask leading questions about hygiene codes, but Junia silences him with a rendition of Ode to a Sponge Forgotten. He backs away like she's contagious. Then Flavia returns from the upper forum, breathless, eyes shining. "You're not going to believe this," she says. "They're opening the real latrine tomorrow. Cleaned, inspected, blessed by 3 minor priests and a guy named Darius who claims he once studied plumbing." You don't cheer not right away. You look around at this pop-up protest turned accidental party. You see how far things spiraled and how close they came to breaking something beautiful. You gather everyone together. Tomorrow, you say, the latrine reopens. But let's remember, it wasn't the stone or the sponge that made it sacred. It was us. Junia weeps into a fig. Gaius nods like he's seen Jupiter himself. The fig vendor just says, "I hope they restock the vinegar." Historians still argue whether communal toilet culture fostered lasting social bonds or just brief, forgettable encounters. But in this moment, as the group disperses under twilight and the scent of warm chestnuts, you know some bonds were built to last. As everyone heads off, some to the baths, some to home, A few just wandering the city in that warm Roman dusk. You sit down alone beside the squid mural. You touch its little painted laurel wreath. It's smudged, probably from Junia's singing-induced tears. And then a familiar voice behind you. You know, it was never about the toilet. You turn. It's the 8 aisle. No robes today, just a plain tunic, sandals with one strap broken, and eyes that look a little less official. He sits beside you. I grew up using one like yours. My grandfather used to hold court there every morning. Argued politics while, well, doing the other thing. You glance sideways. So why shut it down? He sighs. The senator who owns the land next door filed a complaint. Said your place was too loud, too popular. Said it made his fountain look cheap. You snort. It does look cheap. The 8 aisle smirks. Yeah, but he has better connections than your squid. He stands. Enjoy it tomorrow. I can't promise it'll stay open forever, but I can look the other way, for a while. You nod. He walks off into the torchlit shadows. You stay there a bit longer, watching the moonlight slide over the painted marble, listening to the city breathe. You built a toilet. You sparked a rebellion. And you made a squid into a god. The next morning, you arrive before sunrise. The city is still stretching its arms, shaking off sleep. Smoke from breakfast fires curls lazily above rooftops. Somewhere, a rooster regrets every life choice that led it to being a rooster. And there it is, the latrine. Door wide open, fresh rushes scattered across the floor. The mosaic squid somewhat scrubbed but still smirking welcomes you like an old friend. There's even a small pot of rosemary in the corner now. Maybe to help with the smell. Maybe just as an offering to the gods of sanitation. You step inside, slowly. It's cleaner than it's ever been. New sponges hang neatly by the basins. The drainage channel gleams like someone finally bribed a child to crawl through it with a brush. There's a faint floral scent, probably a bribe to the nose godsend just under that. The familiar mineral note of limestone and dignity. You sit in your usual spot. You listen, and then like clockwork they come. Junia, carrying her scrolls like they're sacred. Gaius with his lopsided loaf of activist bread. Flavia wearing a tunic that now reads, "Sponge up and speak out." They don't say much at first. They just sit. Listen. Settle. Like pilgrims returning to a temple. Mainstream historical fact. Roman latrines often reopened after repairs with quiet ceremony. While not full-on religious rites, it wasn't unusual for neighborhood priests or respected elders to bless the space, especially if it had developed a following. Romans were superstitious like that. Toilets could be haunted, cursed, or, in this case, blessed by popular demand. You notice someone's carved tiny laurels around the sponge rack. Gaius leans over and whispers, "Told you this place had spirit." You all burst into quiet laughter. Later, new faces drift in, strangers, a soldier on leave, a baker's apprentice. Even that sandal merchant who used to pretend he didn't know what a latrine wash now takes a seat like he invented the whole idea. And as the space refills with murmurs and gossip and echo-laced arguments, it's like you were never gone. Until the senator shows up. Oh yes, that senator. Draped in self-importance and silk, he marches into the latrine like he owns the moon, scowls at the squid, wrinkles his nose like public conversation might stain his toga. Then very deliberately he sits. Silence falls. He clears his throat. Carry on. And somehow, that's the moment you realize. You won. Because even he can't resist. Not really. The talking, the listening, the strange sanctuary that only exists when people gather to be a little gross, a little honest, and a little too close. Fringe tidbit? Archaeologists have found graffiti, wars mock arguments, and poetry battle-scarved across the walls of ancient latrines. Some even include references to known officials. In essence, latrines served as unofficial press rooms for the people. mixing humor with social commentary. Junia starts composing a new song right there on the spot. The Ballad of the Backside Senator. You pray she keeps it PG. She doesn't. But somehow, it works. A merchant offers figs. Someone else recites bad poetry. You hear two men beside you argue fiercely about whether Saturn is overrated. Someone else suggests holding a sponge toss festival. Everyone cheers. You wonder briefly if that would violate plumbing codes. Historians still argue whether Roman toilet camaraderie was a top-down social equalizer or just a bottom-up byproduct of necessity. But the fact remains, senators and beggars alike sat cheek to cheek. And in that brief, breezy window of time, they were equals. You'd bet your last sponge on it. The senator leaves eventually, so does half the crowd, but you remain feet up, fingers tracing a new doodle of the squid wearing sunglasses. It's peaceful now, like the storm has passed, but left you stronger. You glance over at Junia. So, what now? She shrugs. Same time tomorrow? You nod. Obviously. You walk home in that late morning light, past bread carts and flower sellers, and a group of kids arguing about whether Jupiter farts lightning. And you think about what's just unfolded over the last few weeks. You built a space. You lost it. You fought for it. And now, it's yours again. Not just the marble and water and vinegar, but the ritual, the voice, the knowledge that people still want to listen, laugh, and occasionally high-five over clever sponge jokes. Back at your door, you find a gift, a small clay figurine of a squid, arms raised triumphantly. Tied to it is a note. Long live the Council of Cheeks. F. You smile, and wonder if Rome's ever going to be quite the same. The days pass, and the latrine becomes more than just a place. Again, it becomes the place. Every time you walk through the forum, someone calls out, "Hey, Sponge Chief," or "Lou Whisperer." You pretend to hate it. You don't. The space reinvents itself daily. Gaius introduces something he calls soapbox sittings, where people can stand, ironically, not sit, and rant about whatever's on their mind-bread prices, military taxes, the quality of wine at Sabina's Tavern. People clap, groan, cheer, or heckle. Then they return to their seats and resume the symphony of quiet conversation and light digestive discomfort. You add a tiny shelf for scrolls. Junia insists on calling it the backdoor library. She writes slogans on the wall like "Scribere es lavare mentempto," right is to cleanse the mind. You suspect she made up the Latin, but it's catchy. There's even a kid named Tiro who shows up daily with a tray of honey cakes. He doesn't say much, just offers one to anyone who looks sad. The latrine has its own snack vendor now. Official. One day, a retired soldier, Claudius, arrives with a battered lyre. He plays terribly. You let him stay. Mainstream historical fact? Roman public toilets weren't just functional. They were often strategically placed near marketplaces, forums, and bathhouses, making them natural extensions of public life. They acted as both literal and metaphorical crossroads of conversation. You've taken that idea and sort of run wild with it. Today, there's a toga swap rack. Take one, leave one, no obvious stains, and a chalkboard for matchmaking announcements. Someone even uses it to propose marriage. She says yes. They seal it with a sponge high five. You're unsure if you should be proud or concerned. And then, just when you think it's peaked, a scroll arrives. Official. Sealed. Not with wax, but with what appears to be squid ink. You crack it open. It's from the Aedile, the same one who once shut you down. Congratulations, it begins, on your unprecedented impact on communal morale. By order of the Urban Planning Committee, the Forum Latrina is hereby recognized as a semi-official Civic Engagement Zone, CEZ. You stare. There's more. This designation comes with a modest stipend, quarterly sponge replacement privileges, and the opportunity to design up to 2 additional public spaces modeled after the Forum Latrina. You reread the last line 3 times. Then 4. You shout so loudly, Flavia drops a tray of fig tarts. You don't sleep that night. Your mind races with Design open-air amphitheater for musical bowel movements? A sponge museum? A latrine with a heated bench? No, too much. But maybe not. The next morning, you present the scroll at soapbox sittings. The crowd erupts. Someone throws garlands. Claudius plays the worst rendition of Toilet of Glory you've ever heard. You let the chaos unfold. Fringe tidbit: there's scant but tantalizing evidence that a few elite Roman families sponsored latrines as gifts to their neighborhoods. It was considered a lower tier but honorable form of public service, kind of like donating a bench, but smellier. You decide your new project won't be in the Forum. It'll be in the Transtiberum, the other side of the river. Poorer, louder, messier, but full of heart. You head there with Flavia, Junia, and Gaius. You scout the alleys. You talk to locals. You sit in a few terrible, crumbling public toilets. You leave quickly. But in one dusty square, wedged between a falafel vendor and a crumbling Mithraic shrine, you find it. The perfect spot. You kneel in the dirt. Press your hand to the stone. It begins again, you whisper. The others nod. Historians still argue whether the idea of latrine culture ever truly spread beyond central Rome or remained a Forum-centric phenomenon. But it's possible that enterprising citizens like you helped replicate the atmosphere in other districts. Tiny ripples of rebellion and fellowship radiating outward, sponge by sponge. You draw the first line in chalk. A rectangle, roughly the size of the one you first built. But somehow, this feels different. Like the second verse of a song you didn't know had more lyrics. Flavia suggests including a mural of the senator. Riding a squid. You all agree instantly. A few children start gathering bricks. A merchant lends a cartload of lime mortar. Tiro appears out of nowhere with honey cakes. The sun sets over the Tiber, casting the first sketchy lines of your new latrine into long, mythic shadows. And as Junia begins humming a new tune, something about second chances and very public seating, you realize something. This isn't a sequel. It's a movement. It's 2 months later, and you're back on your haunches, sponge in hand, adjusting the final bench. The Transtiberum latrine is finished, and it's a masterpiece. The tiles came from a demolished villa. The benches are polished, marble reclaimed from a failed temple of Pluto. Apparently the underworld didn't need 2 entrances. The water basin? Fed by a diverted aqueduct branch, courtesy of a friend who owes you for that sponge poem. The people here were skeptical at first. You're not exactly from this side of the river, and nobody forgets a Forum face. But then they saw you sweating, scrubbing, drawing squid doodles in chalk when nobody was watching. And now, it's theirs as much as yours. Kids race in to take the honor seat, the one with the carved dolphin buttress. An old woman named Marcia runs a tight operation at the entrance. No loitering unless you're funny. Someone even installed a pebble mosaic that says, "Sit down, speak up." The energy is different here. A little rougher, a little rowdier, but still unmistakably you. Mainstream historical fact? The Transtiberum district was a real working-class neighborhood, filled with immigrants, freedmen, and tradespeople. It was diverse, lively, and often looked down on by the central Romans, yet it thrived culturally. Scholars even suspect some underground plays and banned philosophy lectures took place here. You glance across the courtyard. A small group gathers around a street performer reenacting the Senator Sponge scandal, using puppets made of vinegar flasks and fabric scraps. He's got the voice down. It's deeply offensive and utterly perfect. Gaius, now styling himself as a public discourse coach, hosts weekly shout clubs where people practice arguing without hurling produce. Junia's started collecting oral stories, and inscribing them on the walls in charcoal, every tale punctuated with a squid stamp. Flavia? She opened a little cart next to the latrine selling souvenir civic hygiene kits. It includes a miniature sponge, a scroll with common discussion starters, and a mint. You never thought this would happen. You just wanted a place to talk. But you made a culture. A soft, weird, sponge-fueled culture. Fringe tidbit? In a few rare inscriptions, some scholars believe they've found early references to latrine-based guilds groups who met regularly in specific public toilets for mutual support, education, or humor. Think proto-book clubs, but warmer, wetter, and with fewer cookies. Today, as you tidy the rushes and refresh the rosemary bundle, a boy runs in shouting, "The governor's assistant is coming!" Oh no. You wipe your hands, fix your tunic, pretend the puppet show isn't depicting the senator as a constipated giraffe. The man arrives in dusty red robes and too many rings. He sniffs, peers around. You brace. And then he says, "My nephew's been talking about this place for weeks. I brought a sponge. Where do I sit?" You gesture, speechless. He grins. Don't worry. I grew up Transtibrum. We know how to squat in style. Later that evening, as the moon rises and laughter echoes off the stone walls, you sit with your feet dangling in the water channel, just listening. The city hums around you, and for once, you don't feel like a tiny cog in a crumbling empire. You feel like a lighthouse. A very smelly, sponge-themed lighthouse. Historians still argue whether communal spaces like these ever meaningfully changed Roman political life. But personal records, graffiti, and anecdotal notes suggest they absolutely shifted local culture, fostering empathy, expression, and resistance, one shared bench at a time. And that's enough for you. You lean back, hands behind your head, smile up at the stars, and wonder if future generations will ever understand how much power a latrine can hold. Or how one ordinary person armed with vinegar, tiles, and unreasonable determination could shift the shape of a city. And now, as the last voices fade into murmurs and the torches gutter low, you finally rise. Slowly. Every joint whispers its protest, but you don't mind. That soft ache is the price of building something that matters. You walk past the walls, your walls dappled with story scrawls and jokes and squid sketches in every shade of ink. You touch the doorway gently as you leave, like you always do, a small promise to return, a little ritual to seal the day. The night air is cool, settling on your shoulders like a soft cloak. The streets are nearly empty. Rome sleeps, and for once, she seems at peace. You pass a baker's stall, already prepping dough for morning loaves. Somewhere, a cat knocks over a vase. You hear a sleepy curse, then silence again. The stars above seem a little brighter now, or maybe it's just the firelight of everything you've built still glowing in your chest. You're almost home. And as your sandals crunch quietly along the cobblestones, you think, tomorrow there will be more stories, more voices, more gentle rebellions, passed hand to hand like sponges, until every neighborhood knows what it feels like to sit beside a stranger and feel, somehow, heard. You slip inside, lay down, close your eyes, and drift gently into a night full of squids, stone benches, and whispered dreams of civics and soap. You've done well. Sleep now,